One of the number one things that I have from nurses who say when they want to start their mobile infusion businesses is they're like, I've already filed my LLC. That is actually not your first step. Did you know that? So if you're about to file your LLC, pause, listen to this video first, and this will give you some more guidance on what you actually should be doing first. So we're going to cover a couple things today. We're going to go over why most nurses want to start their LLC first, what you should be doing. This is a big part because this is where a lot of clinics did it wrong, and it can really, you can set your business up for failure before you even start, and legality is the most important thing before you get started up. Literally the most important, and I hate to say it, most clinics, I would imagine, especially I can just speak for my area that I am in Oklahoma, are not structured right, and that is because IV therapy is very unregulated, so people do what they want, and they're like, why didn't get in trouble for it? No, you have not gotten in trouble yet. So we are going to cover that today. So first of all, let's jump into why do nurses they think the first step is to start their LLC. Well, I am a nurse who has started an infusion business. We are profitable. I do it full time now, and I teach nurses how to do it. We do not know the business side of stuff, do we? No, we know how to be nurses. And so, of course, when you think about starting a business, a lot of times if you go to Google or chat and you're like, how do I start a business? One of the first things it's going to say probably is file your LLC. That's just what we think of. It's not going to hurt doing it, but you might have to go back and fix something because most nurses are going to start off as an LLC, but because of state rules, you may be a company that actually should not be forming an LLC, and you're going to form something else. And so that is why it's important to look into it. So what you actually should be doing first is looking up the compliance within your state. So we have to be compliant as an RN owning an infusion business, we have to be compliant with more than just the Board of Nursing. A lot of times we don't think about that because we're like, well, we're nurses. I'm being a nurse. Yes, but you're also owning a business that is dabbling in other areas of things. So you have to be compliant. You yourself have to be compliant with the Board of Nursing, but your business has to be compliant with way more than just the Board of Nursing. So what am I talking about? There's a couple different things, but the biggest ones are going to be the medical board and also the Board of Pharmacy. So let me just give you some examples. Every state is a little bit different. And so I can tell you in Oklahoma, currently, and let me just say, some states are starting to really crack down on their rules for IV therapy. IV therapy is just very unregulated. So most states, like for Oklahoma, we are technically compounding when we are mixing the vitamins into the bag. That is technically a pharmacy thing, but some states are okay with nurses practicing this. Now, let me explain a little bit when I'm talking about compounding. So compounding, I don't have the exact definition pulled up, but that is going to be if you have a bag of fluid and you're adding even B vitamins, if you're adding anything into that bag, that is compounding because you're altering the final result, I guess you could say. That's different than if you have a flush and you're putting the B vitamins in there, that is diluting. They're they're just two different things. Well, there's different categories that the Board of Pharmacy has, and it's the blanket is called the USP 797. Just think about it as a book. There's a big book called the USP 797, but there's different chapters in it. This is just an analogy. So what we fall under for mobile IV therapy is the immediate use. The immediate use is I would say has the least restrictive. There's rules we have to follow to stay compliant in it, but that allows us to essentially compound. And there are rules about how many things you can actually mix in a bag, and there's, more on that. But essentially, it is a pharmacy thing. Now, there are some states, for example, Oklahoma, the Board of Pharmacy does not have any rules against RNs practicing primarily that immediate use portion of the USP 797. The Board of Nursing also doesn't have a problem with it. But there are some states that the Board of Pharmacy is like, yeah, we don't have a problem with RNs doing this, but the Board of Nursing may say, oh, we don't let nurses do that. It could be vice versa. You could have a state that the Board of Nursing is like, yeah, that's fine. Then you could have another state that the Board of Pharmacy is like, well, yeah, okay, the Board of Nursing says that's fine, but we do not let nurses do that. So that is a lot of why it's so important to figure this out. Now, these are things, yes, you can call the Board of Nursing and the Board of Pharmacy and ask them your specific questions. Normally, there is an educational, like you're calling them and it'll be like, if you have scope of practice questions or whatever it is, hit this number. Now you can call them and ask. You may or may not get an answer. Sometimes boards will be very helpful, and sometimes you will get no answer and they'll say they cannot give legal advice. Of course, there is a specific type of lawyer that you will want to use to verify this, but I like to teach a lot of what you can do so you can kind of avoid, it just saves you money. If the board will give you an answer, that is one less thing that the lawyer will have to go over, because the board gave you the answer. The board is the one who makes the decision. And I know it's frustrating, especially when the board's like, we can't tell you that. Well, they can't tell you that, but if something was to go wrong, then they'll be the first to be like, well, you should have done this and this and this. So it's really, really important to make sure that you're getting these answers before you get started up, to protect you, to protect your business, to protect your patient. That is very, 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 very important. So that is very important. Now, that is just a glint. Like, that is one of the aspects that you have to verify. There are other ones too. I teach a course on this. I go over everything legal, business, IV therapy, vitamin education, marketing. I go over all of that. But we're just going to talk about this little glimmer today. If you would like more information on that, I teach it twice a month live via Zoom. There is a link down below. You can check all of that out. But another thing that we have to be familiar with is the medical board. And some states, nurse practitioners do have full scope of practice. And essentially, as long as you're following the board of nursing's rules, then you could use a nurse practitioner. Again, the lawyer is the one that verifies this. I'm not telling you one way or not to do, but that is another thing. Let me just read you this article. It is absolutely insane. And this is what is causing a bad rap for IV infusion companies. So there was a girl in Texas. I didn't pull it up. I believe it was 2023, but don't quote me on that. And essentially, long story short, she ended up passing away because of something that had happened or had been given to her at just a regular med spa that offered IV infusions. And so there's a course that's going to bring light and attention to everything. I will have that full article listed below so you can reference it and read it as well. But of course, that has caused people to look into it. And some of the big stuff that is being seen is, like this article says that there's a big problem is that consumers, the people who are going to do infusions for, a lot of times don't realize that there's a safety problem here, because there's so many infusion places opening and they may or may not talk to a provider. So if that's normal when they got something, at this clinic, then that must be normal and fine to do all along. And obviously that's not how it works. And so because of that, another important aspect is there should be a patient-physician relationship established. If there's not, that is you, the RN, is prescribing that vitamin infusion. And obviously that is out of our scope of practice. That is what you have a physician for, or a provider, whatever your state is. So let me just go into what happened. So I believe this was back in 2023. This girl, per this article, it appears that she went and she booked an infusion. She was starting a new career. She was like, I'm going to get an infusion. This is, going to help me. Well, the documents say that she got an IV from the owner of the clinic, and it was a phlebotomist, according to her attorney. Phlebotomists, it says, are not licensed in the state of Texas. I'm assuming they need to start IVs. This is just something to show you how unregulated it is, because they were able to open an infusion business and there was no one checking regulations, or, unfortunately, unless something negatively happens like this, you're not going to get in trouble even if you're doing the wrong thing. And that does not make it right. I am so big on legalities, y'all. This is huge. You want to make sure you start up to protect yourself, but also your patients. And also, do we want a bad rap to be made for IV therapy? No. It is so helpful to patient if it's done in the right way. Okay, so let's go back. So the board records say that the IV that this lady was given contained vitamins and a mix of electrolyte. It labeled dangerous, saying one of the ingredients was known to cause complications. Just moments after the needle went in, the lady who was getting the infusion went unresponsive. It says, despite CPR attempts by the clinic owner, unfortunately, she passed away within hours of sudden cardiac arrest. Now, they do not say exactly what it is, And it does not say, at least whenever I was going through it, there should have been a physician that looked over everything and the protocols and what they were giving. But just my initial, I don't know if this is exactly what it was, but in my mind, as an infusion owner, you can order potassium. So just my thought is like, maybe she was given potassium, especially if it ended in a cardiac arrest. And I believe, don't quote me, I think it said somewhere in there that she did not have any prior medical history, but I can't confirm that. I'm pretty sure I read that in there. But anyway, that has caused rules. I believe there was a rule in Texas that is now that RNs have to be the one that that administer the infusions. And this is going to start happening in more and more states if, this is bad. Like that should have never happened. And there is like regulations in place, but unfortunately, again, there is not right now. So I like to teach you what you should do to see what your state says is there, like how you should go about handling, patient interactions and just the process of how the physician sees the patient who can administer the infusions and whatnot. Now, of course, they started doing a lot of looking into rules and regulations just across like the US after that. And it says that they found regulations can vary widely on who can own or oversee IV clinics, what licenses are required for practitioners, as well as what level of monitoring or physician oversight is required. We also discovered some states admitting they have no rules or regulation that guide the industry. That is a problem. But probably 5 or 10 years from now, that could be sooner, there's going to be a lot more strict rules. And I think that's good. Honestly, I do think that's good because there are a lot of Joe Schmoes opening infusion clinics and kind of doing what they want. And that can lead to more patients getting harmed, but also that makes a bad rap of like, people who aren't medical, they're, your consumers hearing the story and then just thinking, oh, it's because what you're getting needs unsafe. No, that's not it at all. It's making a bad rap for everyone. So it's really big, especially this is a marketing point. Once you get your business up and running, educating on how you do stuff, and that will build trust with the patients. They're like, oh, I am seeing a provider. I have an RN who's doing this. It is being monitored. All the steps were, gone correctly. And that way it gives them peace of mind too. So there's another thing that says in this article, done the right way, IV infusions, they're very safe. Not done the right way, there are risks. Clearly, as you saw from this story. I think education is always the most important piece. We need to educate the public, but we also need to educate providers. That is what I'm here to help play a role in as well. Now, they are starting to educate. The last thing in this article I want to point out, they are starting to point things out of like what people should look into if they're going to get an infusion somewhere. I think that's good. But there's this little thing and it says, first of all, they need to research the faculty and the providers. Yeah. Are you talking to a provider? No, that's a red flag. Don't go there. Like that is like what I'm saying. You should always talk to a provider. Number 2, make sure there's a medical evaluation. Provider, like you can't do it without a provider, but unfortunately there are many places you can just book online. Someone will show up and get you an infusion and never talk to anyone. That is wrong. Number 3, ask about credentials. Who is giving your infusion? And that is very important to know too. But of course, you can alleviate a lot of their stress if you were already answering these things before. Number 3, understanding the benefits and risks. That is why you have a provider, so they can educate the patient. That is a part of their consult, should be a part, and discussing the procedure. Also, the provider. Do you see a lot of these things? They're like provider. But again, this is missed a lot, and it's because there's not rules and regulations. It also states that Ohio Medical Board reprimanded a doctor last year for remotely overseeing an IV clinic where the physician admitted they failed to directly interact with most patients. And I would say that happens with most infusion companies. And that is just, we can't do that. It's wrong. Yes, you might not be, doing this in the hospital, but it does not mean that we can operate without a physician. And just having a physician over as your medical director and not talking to patients, that does not mean you're covered. They have to interact with the patient. So I hope that shows you, this is just a piece of it. Just forming your LLC is not enough. And initially, I would really work on compliance and seeing what your state has. Now, of course, I do go over all of this in my course. This is a little glimpse. There's more of it on there. But if you want to do something like actionable today, start this process, get a piece of paper and then put 3 different categories: nursing board, medical board, and pharmacy board. Under each of them, write the contact page or phone number, a way to contact them, whether it's email, phone, whatever it may be. And this week, call one of them or all of them, whatever you have time to do. And I would ask all of them, who regulates IV therapy for nurses in my state? They may not answer you, but these are the first steps that you can go into. And if they don't know, then that's kind of a red flag, which is going to show you, like, even more so, like, the lawyer is needed to help me navigate this, because my state does not have hard guidelines, which, there's a lot of gray area, and that is a little bit of a problem. And then certain things that you can ask, but specifically the nursing board and the medical board, you can ask them, can RNs compound under the immediate use, let me rephrase, can RNs practice compounding under the USP 797, specifically the immediate use? You can ask the nursing board that and the board of pharmacy and see what they say. That will already start you like ahead of where everybody else is starting this, and it'll help you. Now, that is step 1. We're going to go over this month is going to be all about legalities, so stay tuned. If you're wanting to start your infusion business, like and subscribe on my channel. I do tidbits like this that are going to be helpful to you every Wednesday. And next week, we're going to be talking about finding a medical director and the things that are not explained that you should be aware of. So have a great Wednesday, and I hope this was helpful for you so you can start the process of getting your business started.